Hello and welcome to this YouTube live conversation with me, Gretchen Rubin, and my sister.
Elizabeth Kraft.
That's right. We often speak to you from the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. Today we are going live on YouTube and we are talking about tips for getting organized because who can ever have enough tips? I'll tell you one person, and that is Elizabeth.
Yes. Gretchen, if
Um,
you could see around me right now, you would know I need many organizing tips.
well, this just has me licking my chops because my favorite thing to do is to come over to your house and to clear your clutter and to get you organized. I wouldn't say it's your favorite thing.
It's my favorite thing once you're gone, but it makes me tired. Like right when we start, I feel like a tiredness settling over me. But it's so great when you come. It
Yeah.
changes my life.
And working with you, I have learned a lot of my tips because sort of seeing what does and doesn't work and like what
Yes.
you as a person who doesn't sort of naturally tend to, what works for you. So
Yeah.
one thing I would say that works for you pretty well is the 1 minute rule. So explain the 1 minute rule and why this works for somebody who's not naturally super orderly.
Yeah. So, Gretchen, this is one of my favorite things from you of all time. It's that if something can be done in under a minute, do it. So, this goes like for putting a dish in the dishwasher, for throwing away, a piece of paper that you don't need anymore, picking up your sweatshirt off the ground.
Yeah.
These are all things that, come in my life.
Right. And it's just funny how so many people say that just doing these little things can make you feel a lot more organized. They kind of get rid of that scum of clutter that can kind of accumulate on the surface of life and just makes us feel weighed down. And listen, a lot of times when people say, okay, what are some tips to get organized? The first thing I say is don't get organized. And
Yes.
this came out of one of our clutter clearing sessions where you had a very strong desire to get organized. So take us back to that moment.
Yeah. So Gretchen, I was moving from one apartment to another, and you incredibly graciously came out to LA to
Yeah.
help me move and to like get organized before I moved. And beyond, not organized.
Yeah.
And I had all of these papers.
I mean, bags and bags.
Yes, that I had from New York. I'd moved to LA. I had brought all this stuff from New York, like shipped it, I guess. And I was planning to put it all in a series of notebooks. And then that's when you had your amazing insight when you looked at all of these various papers and documents.
Well, because part of it was that you had gotten a lot of statements, like from your union,
Yes.
because you're part of a union, and you're like, I'm going to have it. I'm going to put it in a notebook, and I'm going to get a 3-hole punch, and I'm going to put it in
Yeah.
chronologically, and it was going to be this really big job, and you were getting very fired up. You're getting kind of excited about like getting this all under control, and then I said, "But do you even need any of it?"
Yes.
And you realized you could get it online if you needed it. That
Yeah, I was like,
actually,
"Oh, no, I don't. I
right,
don't need one piece of these documents."
right.
Yes. I mean, including we should mention the lease to my New York apartment from 1994.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of an excavation.
But yeah.
You found checks in there that you hadn't
Yeah.
cashed. I mean, there was fun to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think one of the things is before you say get organized, get rid of everything you don't need, don't use, don't love. And certainly with paperwork, if you've never used it, if you've never like had a reason to consult a piece of paper, a lot of these receipts had never been taken out of the envelope. So clearly they
Right.
weren't something that you were consulting or needing. And then when we sort of looked it up and realized, like, yeah, this is available online if you ever would need it, then it was just very clear, like, okay, let's just
Yeah.
put all this stuff in the recycling. None of it needs to be organized. And when you don't need to organize it, then you don't need to find a place for it. You can just get rid of it.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think, Elizabeth, you love a mug.
Yes, I
And
do.
you will get a mug. And so I think also one thing I often see when I come to your house is like how easy it is for all of us to stockpile things that we
Mm.
don't need. And then you've got to organize them, and then you've got to find a place to store them, and then you're like, well, this doesn't fit, so then where do I put my overflow? It can start to sort of snowball into this organizational effort. And so, like, what do you think about sort of with your mug collection?
Yes, and you know what? For a while, Adam and I, my husband and I were, we were trying to keep the mug collection to one cabinet, but I will say of late, it has spilled over into another
It's
cabinet.
a big cabinet.
I know, but you know, I keep getting mugs because I love them, and what I haven't done is cycled any out because I
Yeah,
do now keep some in the garage. It's very hard to get me to get rid of a mug altogether.
yeah.
I have way more than I need, but you know, I'm very sentimentally attached.
So here's one thing about something like mugs. So something like mugs that have a sentimental value is a little bit different from something like glass jars, where like one glass jar, it's
Right.
like you eat a bar, you get a jar of pickles, and you're like, it's a perfectly good glass jar. Those things can just like fill up cabinet after cabinet, and they don't even have any meaning. One is they're all fungible. One is as good as the next. How many do you ever use at one time? That's a perfect example where you sort of could say to yourself mindfully, I'm going to have 3, I'm going to have 5 glass jars, plastic containers of a certain kind, whatever. And then with mugs, it's kind of a different thing because there you have the sentimental attachment. And then you're really getting into the thing, a different process. So with
Mm.
stockpiling, it's just getting rid. But with something like a mug, some of the questions I would say is like, and I know your mug collection very well. I've contributed to your
Yes.
you know, I have to take responsibility for a good number of those mugs. Um, is like one, like if it's holding a memory, does it really hold a memory? Because I remember one time you were like, "Oh, I got this from a writer's room." I don't even remember that. Like
Right, right.
it didn't even really hold a memory. Um,
Yes.
then there are the ones that, really are just kind of broken, like, you kinda keep them, but you're like, it doesn't really work as a mug," and then you're like, it's kinda like, take a picture of it if it's really important, but it's not serving its function. You never use it as a mug because maybe
Mhm.
it's got a big chip out of it or it's got one of those
Right.
lines where you're like, "Maybe I could use it again," or
Yeah,
maybe
or
the whole
may
thing will explode and
yeah.
spill hot coffee all over
Yes.
everything, and so you never really wanna test it out.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Well, and Gretchen, one thing I sometimes do with mugs is like, especially if they're a little bit too small for what I usually drink coffee out of, I will turn them into items on my desk to hold pens, brads,
yeah,
staples,
yeah,
that kind of thing. Like you, for instance, gave me a Fantasy Island mug for Christmas, which I love. And I'm just thinking, you know what? I should pull that out and use it on my desk.
right. Because it's sort of good as a pen cup because it's sort of, yeah, it's got the
It's like
fan. I'm very
swag.
proud of that. It has the
Yes.
Fantasy Island logo on it.
Looks cool. Yeah, I love it.
Um, Now one thing, Elizabeth, I thought this was like an interesting, you know, you are my little, like, I just study
Yeah.
you as my little laboratory rat running through a maze to see how you respond to things. And one of the things that was funny is, so we went through, and it's all the way back in our episode 10. It was our first very special episode. It was all about us cleaning your closet. And we got into it. This is really big, really deep. And one of the things that you did as a result of this is you got more hampers, which
Yes.
kind of went off the rails a little bit. Talk about like the impulse to get hampers, which was a good impulse, but then it kind of got away from you.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of my biggest problems is having clothes on the floor of my closet, and I will have piles and piles of clothes, and I have laundry mixed up with dry cleaning, mixed up sometimes even with things that are clean and folded. I mean, it's a whole thing. And so I
And
thought
then
if
you have
I,
that weird category that haunts a lot of people, which is it's neither clean nor
yes,
dirty, where it's like
yes,
you don't want to put it in with the super clean clothes, but it's not really
yes,
dirty. And so then it's like in
yes,
this liminal place and like,
yes.
where does it go? Yeah.
Yeah, so I had all of that, and I thought, well, if I get more hampers, I won't have all these clothes on the ground. Well, now I have my original hamper plus 2 laundry baskets and
Yeah.
not that big of a closet. And what happens is I get the same process happens. And what I have now is like clothes that have been at the bottom of my one of my hampers for like 2 years
Right.
that I am undecided about what to do with. And then my other hampers, you know, again get filled with items I'm not sure what to do with. So then I end up with no hampers again. So I'm
Right.
back down to 0 hampers
Well,
now.
and I think at one point you were like, I'm even worse off because when things were on the floor, they didn't get as wrinkled, but putting them in the hamper, they're getting really
Yes.
wrinkled. So actually, I'm
Yes.
actually worse off having the
Yes.
hampers, which I felt very guilty about because I felt like I sort of created the atmosphere in which hampers felt like a
Oh, well.
solution.
You
Um,
can't take responsibility, Gretchen.
well, there is one thing. One of the things that people say is like, am I going to regret if I go through and I get
Mm.
rid of things? And the fact is, almost always, it's very rare to have regret. If you say, do I use it? Do I need it? Do I love it? I think like overwhelmingly people feel freed from getting the space and getting rid of things they don't need, use, or love.
Mhm.
But I will say that I did happiness bully you into getting rid of like an old tired sleep t-shirt, which you
Yes, my
bitterly regret. I have to
yes.
I did that.
It is true. My black DKNY long sleeve nightshirt really was perfect.
Yeah.
And yes, I'd had it for like a good 10 years. But
But
I
that was
do
part of the
miss
magic.
it.
It was
I
so
do
soft.
I do miss that nightshirt. However, I recently got another black nightgown, which kind of takes its place. So you can feel a little bit less guilty about that.
But I learned a really important lesson from that, which was there because what I was responding to was something that you and I are both kind of the same, where we will wear things too long. Like
Yes.
something will really be past its prime. I have this with like
Yes.
white t-shirts. I had this sweatshirt that like no, I should not have been wearing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, sometimes you need somebody to just say to you, like, you know what, you really need to get rid of that thing. But the thing is,
Right.
here, the mistake was A, you weren't wearing it outside. You were wearing it only in your own home. So it doesn't matter if it's like tattered and torn. And you were very actively wearing it. It wasn't something where it was like,
Right.
you know, it had sentimental value or like, you know, you really were still actively wearing it. So the thing is, if we were going to get rid of it, we should have had something to replace it with. We should have said, what's something that's just as good if
Right.
this thing because it's actually being used. And that happens sometimes where you're like, this thing, it really shouldn't be used anymore. But I
Yes.
am using it, which is kind of the opposite problem that you usually see, because usually you have something and you're not using it at all. And you sort of have to say to yourself, let's go and let this thing go live a very useful life with somebody who wants a giant fish platter or
Right.
you know, an oversized red jacket with brass
Yeah.
buttons or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Somebody will love it. Like, let it go do its little job in the universe. Um,
Well, part of it is, do you have enough of that item? I think partly what
yes.
was happening there is I didn't have very many night shirts because,
Yes.
everyone's very particular about what they sleep in. And so therefore I did feel the loss. But
Yes.
since then, I've gotten like 4 more night shirts since I was telling you about my regret, and that has helped ease my regret.
Well, and that speaking of that, I don't one of the things that the way I need to stay organized is I will get too many things of like black cardigans.
Yes.
And then you get very confused, like which one is which, and again, it's hard to stay organized because you've got too many things in a category. It's kind of like the glass jar problem,
Right.
where sometimes organization is a problem because there's just too much to deal with, and so and then and you don't real and you can't use what you have. Um, Now, one thing about staying organized, listen, that I love that I think is something that you're not as inclined to do is I really dislike looking for things. I like to know
Mm.
exactly where everything is because I don't want to have to look for batteries or a
Mhm.
flashlight or a
Mhm.
passport or a stamp. I want to know exactly where those things are. And I find that really satisfying. Like for some reason, it's almost like a game for me or like I take great pleasure in being like, this is exactly where something goes.
Mm.
Whereas I feel like with you, you suffer more of that frustration because it's like in your office or something like that, or
Right.
like in the kitchen where that's
Right.
not as specific. How do you think about that? How and how do you deal with that?
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like I usually sorry, like I usually know where things are
Oh,
sort of
you do?
instinctively. Yes.
Oh,
I will say Adam, my husband, is much more like you. He wants to have the double A batteries in one place, the triple A in
yeah.
another, and it causes him great distress that I don't feel the same. So, I do experience this issue on an ongoing basis.
But you usually know where things are though.
I feel like I do the majority of the time. Yes.
Right.
It does come to pass that I don't, but often like I just instinctively know, which is why sometimes I don't want anyone messing with my stuff, right? I think
Right.
a lot of people who seem cluttered or like that, they don't want someone moving their clutter because they know where things are, even
Yes.
if to someone else it looks like, oh, neatening this up would be so helpful.
Yes. I think that's a really important point, and, like, one of the things that, like, in my study, so I wrote this book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, about, like, how to get and stay organized and create outer order, and one of the things that I think was really valuable, Elizabeth, in, like, being your sister, is that
Hmm.
it really taught me that, like, I feel, like, tremendous energy and peace and calm and focus from getting things, tidied up. But not everybody feels that way. And like for you, you're kind of like on balance, it's better, but you don't really feel it the way I do. It's
Right.
really a preference. And you're extremely efficient and get things done and can find things and aren't frustrated. And so it's really like your preference and my preference. And really when you let me come over and clean your stuff, it's really because I enjoy it so much, you know? And like maybe on balance, you'd prefer to have it that way, but not the way it would back up on me.
Right.
And I think that this point that like if somebody's saying to you, this system works for me, and if you mess with it, you're going to make things worse, not better, you have to believe them and not just keep insisting, like, oh, no, 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 take it from me. My way is better for you. If somebody is saying, I don't have a problem, because sometimes people are like, I'm really having a problem. I can't find
Right.
anything. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't hang anything up in my closet because I got so much stuff. So then you need to deal with it. But if somebody's like, hey, this system works for me, please don't come in here and rearrange my desk. I think it's important to respect that if it's working for the person
Yes, but the issue is, how is it working for the people you live with? My issue
or
is,
work with if you're like
or
going into
work
an
with,
office. Yeah.
yes, but, for me, Adam really doesn't like clothes on my floor. If he sees that, he finds that depressing. So the main reason I care is because I wanna be a thoughtful partner,
Yes.
but it is hard for me, and I will say it is an ongoing struggle. It is not something in being married almost 15 years that I have, perfected.
Well, as your sister, I can say you've made immense progress.
I think
If
I
I were married
have.
to you, I think I would also see like, well, there are more kitchen cabinets that could be closed here.
Yes.
Um, well, it's funny about your closets because we talked about this on the Happier podcast, and like, it was sort of like, what am I going to do? Because it's like bugs Adam and you were doing this like renovation, and many people said what I thought was like very obvious and like a really good idea, which is put a door in your closet.
Yes, that would still be a good idea. We do not have doors on our closets for, many reasons that
Right.
if you've
That
ever
made
renovated made a lot of sense at the time,
yeah,
but probably wasn't a great economy. We
right.
probably should have gotten the doors. But to go back and get them now seems
Yeah.
like a big
Well,
pain.
doors are something that you're like, why are they so bonkers expensive? Like a
Yes, I know.
doorknob. You're like, what? I just thought this was like a little doohickey thing. It's like, oh no, that thing's gonna cost you.
Yeah.
Um, and then kind of the final thing I want to say about or outer order is begin with the thing that bugs you.
Mm,
Like, so Elizabeth, if you had to pick like one area that bugs you, is there something that you're like, yeah, like it's the mail, or it's the
right.
kitchen, or it's the pantry, or it's my desk? Like,
It's
what?
my desk, I would
Okay.
say, because I think I would feel more professional if my desk was cleaner.
Well, and you do a thing, Elizabeth, that I had never really seen before, but I have to say, having seen it in your office, I've now kind of fallen into it myself. I kind of get why it's an appealing, yet it looks very disorganized, which is storing things under your desk.
Yes,
You
I
last
do.
time I was there, it was you couldn't put your knees under your
Yes.
desk because
No,
it was
yes.
packed with stuff.
I do that, yeah.
And sometimes, like for me, it's like it's printer paper, and
Mhm.
that is an organized place to put it because it's very handy and it's out of the way. And my desk is very deep, and so it doesn't interfere with my feet. But it does look disorganized because I
Right.
have a little teeny tiny office, and when you come in, you see it, and so it's that clutter in my eyes,
Mhm.
but I don't have any place else to put it, and it is an organized place to put it. Um, but I do like the last time we cleaned out your office, we spent a lot of what you had at your desk was just like empty
Empty
boxes and bags.
boxes. Yeah.
And so I was like, well, this is the easiest work I've
Yeah.
had. We just put all this stuff in the recycling. It
Yeah.
was like, oh, that was like
Yeah.
big bang for the buck. Um, and it made a huge difference. So I do think that sometimes just looking at a space. One thing that they often say is like take a picture of a space because a lot of times when you look at a picture of an area,
Mm.
it's very obvious to you why it looks cluttered. Whereas if you're actually
Mhm.
looking at the stuff, sometimes for whatever reason you don't notice it. And so
Yeah.
sometimes they'll say take a picture and think like, well, how could I stage this picture? Um,
That's a good idea.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Well, and
well,
again, for me, it's the things that I don't know what to do with. For instance, under my desk right now, I have all of these like sweatshirts. Sarah and I did a show called The Fix, and we
yeah,
got crew gift was a sweatshirt, and I ended up in possession of like 4 extra Fix sweatshirts.
yes,
So I don't want to throw them away, but I don't in theory want to keep them forever like in the garage. So I just leave them under the desk, like, and they're in limbo, you
right.
know. They're in purgatory.
Well, I think that is the hardest kind of clutter to deal with, where you sort of suspect that you don't need it, use it, or love it, or like maybe you think it might be broken, but maybe really there's an issue with the plug, and so if you just like jiggled the plug, or if you tried it in a
Right.
different socket, or like you thought that the lid didn't fit, but maybe you didn't have it on right. Like when there's that decision making that has to come and it just always feels and this is where you can sometimes use power hour, which power hour is when you make a list of all these like little nagging tasks that can pile up and things that can be done at any time or often done at no time. So you make a list and then you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna deal with it. I'm going to take an hour on the weekend or whatever. I'm not going to spend the whole day, but I'm just going to like march through as many of these tasks as I can do in an hour. And if I can't do it this week, I'll do it next week, my next power hour. And you could just say, like, I'm just going to sit down and call Gretchen and
Mhm.
talk through what are my options. I
Right,
got these
right.
4 sweatshirts. What do I do? And then we just,
Yes.
because once you made up your mind, it'd be a lot easier. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was so fun. I cannot wait to
Yes.
my next time that I come to LA. We can get organized. Yes, I will enjoy it. You will enjoy the aftermath.
Yes, I will.
Yes, and if anybody has any suggestions, tips for getting organized, how do you help other people get organized? How do you keep organized yourself? We can all learn from each other. It's so fun. I filled a whole book with these ideas, and I'm still collecting more. So let us know in the comments, and if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It really does help people.